Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought I would do a thoughts video today, basically because of the fact that I've been playing a lot of the high-ranking stuff of ground recently, basically to get the T90 and the T80 BVM, and also have a look at some of the other vehicles that are around, trying to spade some of them. Last year there was a lot of criticism when it came to me, whenever I was talking about high-ranking vehicles, and the reason is because the majority of the time what I would do is I would research through the tech trees evenly, which left me in a place where I was rank 5 or rank 6 in most areas, but I was spading vehicles as I was going along, and so I wasn't reaching those high echelons. With the thanking of streaming and the fact that I've been playing the game a lot more rigorously over the last year or so, I found myself now at the highest echelon of the game in ground forces and have spaded a bunch of vehicles that are the highest BR. This includes the Leclerc, the STRV-122A, the Ariete, and also stuff such as the Challengers, and stuff like the IPM-1, and the T72B, and now I'm currently spading the T80U, which is one step below, of course, the highest echelon of the Soviets. I've also spaded the Leopard 2A5, and halfway through the 2A6. I've done this because of the fact that I think it was a good idea to try and get as much experience as possible in playing the highest rank of the game, so I could give my opinions on it. And it's definitely been a wonky ride when it comes to those opinions. They seem to change quite a lot depending on what I'm playing at the time, and that, you know, kind of makes sense, and it shows why if you have individuals who only play one nation, it's very hard to use their opinions in general overall balance, because you don't see all of the other sides of the coins. It's very simple to me to understand that the Type 90, which was one of the funnest spades I've done at high tiers, was very fun until you... it's very fun once you get to the APF SDS. You know, the Leclerc was really fun, the 2A5 was really easy, and the STRV-122A was a cakewalk. Now that I'm doing the T80, it still feels pretty fun, but I've got to say, over the last year or so, what I class as RNG of the matchmaking has increased significantly. Now, it's a bad phrase for it. RNG of the matchmaker is not really what it is defined as. What basically I'm talking about is the rock, paper, scissors scenario that we have at high tiers. Pretty much, you have vehicles which counter other vehicles, but then they get hard countered by others. Examples of this are, let's say, you have a T80. Now, a T80 is generally pretty good against light vehicles, it's great against stuff which has heat, so it's good against stock vehicles, and it's generally good against other MBTs. Those two vehicles match up well against each other, it's a good fight. But then if you add a helicopter into the mix, such as an AH-64, or let's say a UHT Tiger or something like that from Germany, then the helicopter has the advantage over the ground vehicle. Then let's bring in an airplane on the side of the T-80. Generally the airplane has an advantage over the helicopter if the helicopter isn't paying full attention. And then from there, you know, the AAs on the ground generally are pretty good against the aviation. Even if the planes are flown well, it's very hard to get your ordnance off on the battlefield against stuff like tanks if you have AAs up, which are doing their jobs. And we've seen a little bit more focus on those AAs going forward because of the fact that they've added stuff with the VT-1 missile and so on and so forth. So you have this rock, paper, scissors scenario, which kind of exists at other tiers, but it's not as prevalent, and it means that if you end up in a situation where you have a certain vehicle, there's no way you can come out on top. And these situations you just have to blow over and be like, yeah, that just is how it is. You know, there's nothing I can do about that scenario apart from doing as best you can in that specific vehicle, and then maybe it'll give you enough SP to be able to get into the vehicle that counters you, or get into the vehicle that is useful for that situation. Now, this doesn't really work in two factors. The first factor, which a lot of people have discussed, and I agree with, is the start of a battle at high ranks. At the start of the battle, you are basically completely up to luck of the draw. Maybe you get 3 rushing helicopters, maybe you get 3 rushing very light vehicles, maybe you get, you know, a whole team versus NBTs on one side, and the other side has Type 93s running around with some lighter vehicles that are easier to kill. Sometimes you can lose your the first battle of the game, or you can lose the whole game just based off what people spawn in at the start of it, and this can be very demoralizing to be able to deal with, but there's not a lot you can do about it. It just is one of the fundamental issues that War Thunder has, which is the fact that you can't see what your enemy is spawned in before you spawn in, and even then you can't really see what your allies have spawned in unless you want to wait a few seconds, which can be detrimental to your positioning and can be detrimental to what is going on. I've had a few games in the last few days with the T80 and the T72B3 lineup where I've ended up in a situation where I've had either 1 or 2 K50s or K52s or Mi-28s on my team, and they have been able to rinse, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 MBTs from the other side, giving us a distinct advantage, meaning that we can push it forward and therefore win the game as easy as that. And that means that that game is pretty much won in the first, 10 or 20 seconds of the battle. You just have to make sure to see it home, because of the initial advantage the helicopters give you. And this is just part of the rock, paper, scissors scenario. And then let's say that happens to somebody 3 times in a row, then they spawn in an AA at the start of the game. And then what happens is there are no helicopters. So now you're just stuck in an AA and you can't do anything until, people start spawning helicopters later on, or maybe aircraft, which both might not happen, which also happens in games because there is no way to predict what the enemy team are going to be spawning in. So you have to roll the dice sometimes. You have to just hope for a fact that you've picked the right vehicle to go in, and sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right. And that means that there is this element to top tier, which is very RNG. And over the last few patches, it's got a lot worse, I've got to say. The first edition, of course, was when the helicopters came in, stuff like the K50, the K52, even the Tiger with the fire and forget missiles, the PARs, and then also you had access to the AH-64s and the AH-1Z. These were very abusive things. Then they swapped them, so they changed their SP costs, so they weren't able to be used at the start of the game. And now, you can adapt to fighting helicopters. It's not the easiest thing to do, but if you know a helicopter's there, which is half the battle, you normally have enough cover on a lot of the maps to be able to, move around the place. You also have a lot of AA machines, such as, the new ITOs, or whatever they're called, for Sweden and France, that are able to use their missiles, which are incredibly fast, to try and take out helicopters at great speed. But now you have a new addition to the mix, which is the Maverick. And the Maverick takes everything that is annoying about helicopters and attaches it to a plane that is going way faster and can hit you from any angle. As I said before, the great thing about stuff such as helicopters is you're able to reposition behind buildings, behind mountains, or behind cover, and it's very hard for the helicopter to hit you. And generally, if they get into a position where they can hit you, they are very vulnerable to ground AA, or they're very vulnerable to planes because they have to go pretty high. When it comes to aircraft, that is not the case. Aircraft can be incredibly fast, they can stay incredibly high, they can set up shots with the Maverick and be able to just annihilate whole teams. I've had many games where I've had either a Phantom or an F5, which has been able to, or an A7, which has been able to take out 3 to 4 ground vehicles in a single pass with Mavericks, and then our team is just screwed and we lose. It's as simple as that. And this is only going to get worse as we get more and more of this fire and forget weaponry, and it's just very, very annoying to play against. I don't know how else to put it. Just like with the G91R3 and the Nords that exist in the area of 8.7 and a little bit higher, it's really annoying to face when you can't counter it at all. And you can't counter it in an MBT, you just end up dying because there's nothing you can do about it. Most of the time you don't even know it's coming in because you can't hit the aircraft, and a lot of them come from a top-down perspective. Also, a lot of stuff has flares now, so it's a little bit harder to shoot them down with certain, radar-guided AA, but that's not a huge issue. But the main thing that happens is, let's say you have a Maverick-wielding aircraft, then if you don't have an AA up, and they're able to go high, and they're able to loop over, and they're able to bring down the pain with the Mavericks, you just lose. That's 4 kills very quickly off the bat, just like it used to be with Phantoms. When you have the arcade bombing marker with the bombs, you could easily just drop bombs. Now it's just easier to do for Phantoms and other machines for that. And then you have the automatic rangefinders on top of that, making, MBTs shoot incredibly quickly. Then you also have some other changes which have made stock vehicles even worse compared to their fully spaded counterparts, such as the laser rangefinding change. And it's just really annoying. I don't know how else to put it. I know a lot of people want expansion of mechanics. They want new shiny things every time. But every time they do these new shiny things to the high ranks, it throws it into a massive kilter, which needs balancing, which takes a long time, generally around about, 30, but maybe 3 to 6 months to be able to get everything back in kilter. And then at that point, you have a new update, which adds more mechanics, which throws it off into kilter again. And it's just this constant cycle of just different playstyles, but all based around the same problem, the core problem, which is the RNG of what your team is going to bring out and also what the enemy is going to bring out. And I don't think that's ever going to be solved, just because of how War Thunder works and how they don't want to take away the ability of players to play what they want. But it all comes down to that one fact, and it's one of those things that, if you're a high-ranking player, you've just probably got used to at this point, where some matches you'll just spawn in and you've lost, or you've won, depending on the team composition that you see and what you play. Hopefully, over the next few months, when it comes to War Thunder high ranks, it becomes a little bit less RNG in that regard. I don't know how they would do it, apart from forcing people to play certain things, but I don't think they're going to do that. The only way they can really do it is through SP costs, to try and help people get certain vehicles off the ground once again. But as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts on the top tier right now, I'm always ears open when it comes to them, and I would love to hear your opinions about what is your thoughts on it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank BRFC, Swollen Ostrich, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Conte Baraka, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Lafouche, Bareen and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.